Got it.
All right, I think we are live. Let's see, I think we're good to go. All right, for anyone joining, welcome to our second session this week for Google Hangouts. You can see I'd like to introduce you to my dog, Max, back there. It looks like he'll be joining us for today's session. And more importantly, I would like to introduce Linda Pasamanek, who is a guest who's going to be joining us for the Google Hangout session today. Sorry about the technical difficulties yesterday, but we're really excited that we can have this extra session. I think last week it was really great to get the feedback and perspectives from the students and from the learners. And so this week we thought it might be nice to add a component for someone who's very new to teaching PBL for the first time. And not only that, but also teaching PBL in a virtual online environment, and kind of to compare and contrast a little bit the MOOC, PBL face-to-face, and PBL in a closed online course. We thought that would be an interesting perspective and some insights and observations to share with you guys today. So I'd like to introduce Linda, and then we're just going to kind of have a little bit of a conversation about it. Feel free, I think we've got the Q&A session open. So for any of you who are joining live, please feel free to go ahead and post any questions that you have, and we'll address them as they come up. Linda is actually, she is president of eLearning Architects, which is an educational consulting firm. And she also happens to teach in a fully online graduate program using PBL. This was her very first time teaching the course. In fact, she's halfway through it right now. She's in week 4 of an 8-week fully online PBL course. And so, Linda, if you could just say hello real quick.
Hello, everyone.
Hear you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. And before we kind of jump into Linda's experience as well, I wanted to just share a little bit of my own and observations in particular related to PBL. I had the wonderful opportunity to live in Maastricht and live and work at Maastricht University and be trained there on problem-based learning face-to-face. And since that time, I think it was about 4 years ago, I was able to come back to the United States and have translated and integrated PBL into a fully online graduate program as well. There's a lot of interesting differences. Primarily being that in face-to-face PBL, even in Maastricht, all of the rooms are designed around having about 14 people plus the tutor. And so the groups are quite a bit larger. I noticed when we moved into a virtual environment, and I'd say the larger groups are also similar to what's being done here in the MOOC right now. In our closed course, in our fully online program using PBL, it was what we discovered through trial and error and mistakes along the way was that smaller groups work a lot better in the virtual environment in particular, because of the rate of communication, of information that needs to be shared, of posts, and the ability to be able to go through and read and digest all of that. And so we found that groups about 4 to 5 people in size worked a lot better, and anything above that really just became too much to manage in a fully online virtual course, at least. Again, in face-to-face and in the MOOC, we're using larger groups because that's really the traditional PBL model. A couple of other observations that we found was that because of the virtual environment and because it was a fully online course, we had students who were literally participating from all around the world, which is also very similar to what we're doing here in the MOOC. And so we had to get creative in terms of being able to manage time schedules, particularly with all of the different time zones, which I'm sure many of the groups in the MOOC are also, kind of configuring that as well. In the fully online course, again, it's an 8-week course that's self-contained online. The students, it was really important for them to be able to use software outside the course. And again, I also see that similarity within groups within our PBL MOOC. So a lot of teams would participate and engage with one another beyond just the scope of the platform provided. So even a lot of teams now are able to have live synchronous calls, are able to communicate with Twitter or email or Trello or Twitter or whatever forms of communication exist virtually outside the platform. I've noticed in the MOOC, people are moving to whatever communication forms work best within their teams. And that was also true within our online course, online courses using PBL, was that it was really important to allow the teams the opportunity to find which communication tools worked best for them. And whether that was housed within or external to that platform. I noticed for the scheduling, at least in our online courses, we always use Doodle, which is just a free online scheduling assistant. So everybody can kind of enter which days and times work for them. So if you have a team of 5 to 6 people, it helps kind of coordinate which schedules people want to coordinate for live synchronous communication or video calls. In our PBL course, we used a lot of video conferencing. We would do the video conferencing for the pre and the post discussion, and sometimes the teams would meet in between. A lot of times they also used just calling each other if they were in the same time zones. But there was a lot of video conferencing used. It seemed like that 1 hour of live discussion saved hours worth of text-based communication. So those were just kind of a few observations of some of the similarities and the differences between the traditional face-to-face PBL, the PBL MOOC that we're all part of an experiment doing now, and then also the face-to-face online PBL in a closed course that's been offered. And we've been offering that for the last 4 years. So what I'd like to do now is kind of open this up for more discussion and conversation and invite Linda to join us and share her observations, because I think she's in a place that's probably going to be very familiar to those of you who will be new to teaching PBL after this MOOC. Hopefully you'll be able to kind of apply that in your own context. So I'd like to just invite Linda to share some of her thoughts, observations, insights, challenges that she's experienced teaching her first PBL course. And again, you're welcome to share any questions, comments, thoughts you guys would like to in the chat also. All right, Linda, feel free to just share what your experiences have been so far.
Hey, thank you, Amber. Well, it's definitely been a different experience teaching PBL versus a traditional online course. I really enjoy it. I mean, I love it. It's I think there's a much higher level of connectedness with students than in a traditional online course, which is great from my perspective. And I think the students like it as well. Although I have had some students comment that all the connection that is required to work on problems throughout the week, it almost sort of makes it a little bit less, they always say in online learning that it's anytime, anywhere learning. And, all the connection that's required for the team to, build shared mental models and really understand and produce solutions, it takes a lot more coordination and it's less flexible. So I thought that was a really interesting observation from a student this week. But they like it. I think the work level has been surprising for them. And probably the biggest challenge for both them and me is the balance of it. Just trying to figure out, in a traditional teaching model, they're used to coming to you and saying, what should I do? What's the right answer? What are you looking for? And they really want to go back to that. They're constantly asking me, what are you expecting? What do you want? And I sense sometimes it frustrates them when I say, you guys can help shape that process of what you're going to produce and what you're solving. There is no right or wrong answer. They really don't like hearing that. Not because it's something that they like the freedom and they like the process, but I think they're concerned about their grades. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I totally understand that. So from their perspective, I think the workload's been surprising. They have to do a lot more prep work than I think they're used to before they get on a weekly video call. From my perspective, it's very similar, because it's so easy to want to, you know, kind of guide, you know, it's hard to know how much to guide them versus let them kind of struggle. And so because you're very connected with them and you're talking with them multiple times a week, I can see the frustration on their face. And so it's difficult to always know, well, when is a good time to let them kind of struggle through this and figure it out on their own? And when should I jump in, you know, so that they don't get exasperated and frustrated? So we're kind of figuring it out together, I think. And, you know, it's been a really amazing process, because I've seen more growth and more openness in this group than I've probably ever seen in an online course. So, I mean, they're a great group of students, which I think is a lot of it. But I do think the process really brings out a lot of elements that that you don't typically get in a course or in an online course. In fact, one student commented to me that the projects are more like being at work. And I was like, yeah, exactly, right. You know, so you're actually going to apply, you know, this all that you're learning in your workplace. And I think that's a tremendous skill set and one of the greatest assets of PBL. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much where we are, I'd say.
Well, and Linda, what do you think from an instructor perspective has been some of the most significant challenges? I know the first year I taught PBL online in my own course, where I had luckily a lot of assistance from really great experts help me to develop some of the PBL questions, but I really struggled. And I think there's a lot of discussion in the MOOC right now as well around this, that there is, just like for the students, you know, with an ill-defined problem, there's no one right solution. And I think for instructors, it's hard for us to know that there's no one right solution in terms of how engaged or, you know, how engaged to be. How do you know that level of engagement, whether to interact, whether to let them figure it out on their own, whether to observe? So I know for me, the first few times I taught, that was really a challenge. I still remember to this day, there was a great group of students that I was working with, a great group of learners, and they're all adult professionals who are getting their master's. So they work full time next to their study. And so they were very motivated. They had this great conversation going. And as an observer, I was very excited about what they were doing as the tutor and the instructor. And all of this wonderful dialogue and discussion was occurring. And then I jumped in and I said, oh, that's great. You know, something else you could consider is blah, blah, blah. And it just killed the conversation. And that was the first time that I really noticed how important it is for this learning process to be very self-directed and to only interject when guidance is needed, or if they're kind of navigating off course from the problem. But it was a very important lesson learned for me that first time I taught was, wow, just making one comment really, really created a point in which the conversation died. And so I think that's also a really, one of those skill sets that it's kind of like you learn along the way by trial and error. And that may be what many of you, for those of you in the PBL MOOC who will be teaching this, a lot of it is just going to be trial and error along the way. And you'll have those lessons learned for yourself. But that was one learned for me that I realized immediately, like, this group is incredibly self-sufficient. They are doing a phenomenal job, and all I need to do is get out of their way and just support them moving forward. So I'm wondering, and every class, every team is completely different in terms of the level of support and guidance that they need. So I'm also wondering, Linda, what's been your experience, or what do you consider to be some of the biggest challenges as a first-time PBL instructor?
I mean, I think it is just that challenge of knowing when to interject. I think that the team that I'm working with right now, about half of them have a really different style of approaching problems. And I think it took a couple of weeks for them to start talking about how they approach problems, even though we kept talking about, you know, that in the process, that you need to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses and figure out how to work together well as a team. because that's going to make the whole problem solving process a lot smoother. But I think it took them a couple of weeks to get comfortable, even though they'd read stuff about building trust in groups and psychological safety. It just took a while before they finally started challenging each other a little bit. And one student started sharing, you know, their Myers-Briggs type indicator, and I could see light bulbs going off in each other's heads of like, oh, this is why it's hard for me to understand you. And, you know, because you're a big picture person and I'm a detail person. So that was hard, you know, because I think going back, I would maybe emphasize that more now that I've done it one time. But you're right, there's a lot of trial and error. And, you know, I think they appreciate that because I'm willing to kind of experiment and try different things with them too. So, you know, I just hope in the end it comes out all right. But I really think it will, because like I said, I've seen the team struggle. I think at first they were kind of like very much in the group project mentality of like, okay, let's divide and conquer. You know, we'll get this knocked out and I'll have the weekend off. And I think, you know, it was just a lot of frustration. I think that was one of the biggest surprises to me is, I mean, I knew that it would be different, but I think there was maybe a little bit more frustration and exasperation than I anticipated, just because they were really struggling to figure out how to communicate with each other and get the chemistry of their group right so that they could function efficiently and effectively. But I think they're there now. I mean, I see them being very open with each other in a constructive way, and, you know, kind of playing off each other's strengths in a way that they never would have done if this process hadn't played out. So, you know, I don't know whether I interjected at the right time or not. I think maybe I could have helped a little bit more, you know, kind of just helping them anticipate that this would probably happen. But yeah, that's definitely the trial and error of, you know, doing this for the first time. But they're definitely getting there. So I still struggle with it a little bit, though, just knowing, like, when should I jump in? You know, I'm not really that concerned about awkward silences on the call. I'll let them kind of think and reflect, but they are very uncomfortable with it. So so sometimes it's just, you know, kind of, it really changes. It's very fluid and very dynamic. I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, but that's how it's been so far.
Yeah, no, actually you answered it beautifully. Thank you. And even with, you know, I think you brought up a really great point when you were talking about the importance of that team forming stage and, you know, how they learn to come together as a team, how to create a shared mental model. The difference between teamwork versus problem-based learning is that collaborative knowledge sharing is very different than just piecemealing things together. And so it's interesting to hear that you also find that. What do you think was most helpful in facilitating that type of coming together for the team? Because I know that doesn't, especially in a virtual environment, sometimes that's really hard to do.
I think the thing that was most helpful was just being able to have individual conversations with students about their strengths, and really encouraging them to kind of step up with their strengths, because I think they all felt very ambivalent and unsure about the process. Mm-hmm. And so I think in addition to meeting with them as a group, I've had a lot of, you know, individual conversations with them where they've kind of shared their frustrations. And, you know, each of them, they bring so much experience and knowledge. You know, you're talking about storming and, you know, just group formation. They know all the models, they know all the theories. The PBL process forces them to actually do it, which was really different, because, you know, in the first week they were like, we got it, we know all about storming, norming, and forming and all that. But they knew about the theory, but they actually had to do it. And I think that was a huge difference. But yeah, I think in terms of really helping the team kind of start to come together, it was probably more of me being able to work with students individually. And then I tried to watch them as a group. I tried to stay out of the way and let them hopefully start to utilize their strengths with the team. And I kind of would cross my fingers and hope that the team would like recognize someone trying to contribute in a different way, or maybe say, hey, I don't think things are on the right track, guys, because I didn't want to do it. I don't want to constantly be the one saying, well, are you sure you really have the big picture here? So a lot of it was just encouraging individuals, like, you have great insight, you're on the right track, trust yourself, and jump into the conversation. And it didn't happen instantly, and it's still happening, but I'm seeing it every week incrementally, where people are kind of taking different roles and becoming more bold in the process. So that's probably been the most helpful thing.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Well, and I think too, it really gives a great opportunity at the beginning of any PBL course, or at least any course that I teach which requires any level of teamwork. It's a great opportunity to introduce concepts from, for example, like Amy Edmondson on psychological safety in teams and the importance of having constructive conflict, to be able to say that it's important for your team to challenge one another, to ask meaningful questions, and to avoid groupthink. So helping them kind of create the foundation for those key principles. Or as you mentioned, it's a great opportunity to introduce them to the concept of a shared mental model if they haven't been introduced to that yet, or what collaborative knowledge building and knowledge sharing looks like. And so I think that's also what's a great element in terms of teaching PBL, whether it's face-to-face in a MOOC or online, is if you can introduce some of those key concepts that set a good foundation for teams to be really open and communicative, then I think that also helps too. Or at least it's been my experience that it did, because it's a lot easier to say, well, it's a good thing if we're challenging each other. It's a good thing to have constructive conflict. It's a good thing to ask meaningful questions for one another. So if everybody kind of has that shared mental model to begin with, it seems like it promotes a lot more interaction and meaningful engagement among the team members too. So, and I'd like to go ahead and open it up too. I don't want to talk the entire time. I know this is just kind of sharing ideas, insights, observations, but if you guys would like to post any questions that you have, we'd be happy to answer those and just continue kind of expanding on this discussion. And I think I should see them come through. Right now, everything is in Dutch, so all of my prompts, I may have to take a moment to translate them to in Google Translate, but otherwise I think everything might come through in English. So, but some of the other observations that I think are really interesting is within this MOOC. This is the first time PBL has ever been attempted in a MOOC. And so having these teams, it's been really fascinating to see the ways of communication within the different teams. And it seems like a lot of the teams who have been pretty much participating through the life of this MOOC and seemed really dedicated to working together, to submitting the assignments that are due. It seems like those groups have been very intentionally organized in terms of how they organize their time, in terms of who is working as the group leader or team leader or whatever terminology you like to use. But it seems like those that have been intentional with time and also considering the time zones of all of their group members have been pretty efficient and very successful at their collaboration. So I do think that's a pretty critical piece. And again, when you get into that virtual world and when you're working with multiple time zones, that becomes so important. A lot of times we see it as a huge disadvantage. And having the opportunity to work on projects, all over the world, I actually see it as a huge advantage. I know there are colleagues that I've worked on research projects with, and so we basically have a continuous cycle of information exchange going, because I can work on it during the day and then share it with her. And when I'm asleep at night, she's working on it. So we can kind of have a continuous process of review and evaluation. The synchronous elements get a little bit harder with those types of collaborations, but I think part of it is also just trying to see some of the challenges and leverage them as an advantage versus a disadvantage. And so that I think working within virtual environments with multiple time zones, that's one of those areas that people typically see as a disadvantage that you could really turn into something that's can allow you to be even more productive. So, and I'm not seeing any questions come through at this point. Linda, did you have anything else you wanted to add or share? I know we're coming up on the 30-minute mark. I think my clock might be a little bit fast and maybe we started a bit early, but did you have anything else you wanted to add or observations to share with this group? I think it's really interesting to test out this PBL model in a MOOC. And there's been a lot of great discussion around that, even in the general discussion this week. But it's also what I'm incredibly impressed by so far are how the teams have decided to organize themselves and to work together and the exchange that can occur. You know, when I see teams from literally all over the world, that's pretty exciting to see. And to see the tools that you guys are identifying to help you in that collaborative effort. I think that's something that we also need to take note of.
No, the only other thing I would add, Amber, is just that I think one thing that's been helpful for me as a first-time tutor is just having resources that, you know, both watching videos and I've been going in the MOOC and looking at different videos and watching students. You know, there's videos you can find from all over the world of people doing PBL, and then having folks like you to talk to. Because, you know, it's new for the students and they're unsure of the process. Mm-hmm. And so am I. So it's been really helpful just to see examples of PBL and to have people to bounce ideas off and say, is this normal? What am I doing wrong? Can you give me some hints? And so, you know, if you're doing this for the first time, I would really seek out those resources if you can find them, because I would probably be a lot more frustrated and maybe unsure of myself if I didn't have experienced folks to talk to tell me, you know, hey, that's normal, that's okay. And I even shared a video from this MOOC with my class about students commenting on how PBL works for them and how it can be difficult, it can be a little frustrating, but it's worth it. And my students loved it. They were like, oh, thank goodness we're not the only ones. This is really hard, but you know, we know we're getting it. It's interesting. They're like very much like they're up for the challenge now. At first they were kind of like, I'm not really sure about this. And now they're like, we will figure PBL out. We will figure these problems out and we're going to improve. And, you know, they're really like, I don't know, they're definitely engaged at this point in the process. So it's been a lot of fun.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing and just, excuse me, thank you for sharing and just giving us kind of a summary and synthesis of some of your key experiences or lessons learned along the way. And I think you bring up, again, another great point, which is the network that you guys are creating right now within this MOOC, within your team, within the team leaders in the MOOC. It's a great opportunity. So that way, when you do put PBL in your own context, I hope these types of connections and the network you're establishing, creating will extend far beyond this MOOC. Because like Linda said, that's one of the critical pieces for her right now. And I remember not just the first year that I taught PBL, but also every year since, having that additional perspective of others who have done it, of others who have been there and can give advice or help you tweak your question a little bit or reconsider how to engage or interact with students. I think it's really important to have that type of feedback. I don't know about you guys, but I know for me, I don't work well in a vacuum. I like to have feedback. I like to have an exchange of ideas. And so the fact that, you know, you've got 1,000 people all interested in PBL that are all working within this MOOC right now, it's a great opportunity to connect with them, not just while you're learning about PBL, but once you put that in context. So hopefully you'll be able to kind of continue to not just learn about how to integrate PBL and teach it, but also tap into these resources in human capital that you guys have developed in the MOOC as well. And I think we just saw a question come through or a comment. It says, hello, unfortunately, I have to drop out of the course, but I will try to recover some actions if it's possible. Do you already have any information about the profile of your students? Is PBL spread around the globe? Yes, it is. In fact, if you're in the PBL MOOC, you can look on the Google map and you can see, I was actually just looking in there earlier today before the course, just to see if any additional locations have popped up. But you can look in the course, I believe you can go to course home and then scroll down and you'll notice you can access the map that's, everybody has kind of entered pins from where they're located. And it's literally every country that you can imagine. So it's definitely, I think PBL is definitely spreading around the globe. There are certainly pockets of it where it's more widely practiced. So for example, at Maastricht University, the entire university is centered around PBL. And so all of their courses, regardless of discipline, are PBL based. Whereas where I teach, PBL is only in our adult education master's program, because that's where we've been able to integrate it. We've integrated it into almost all of our courses, but it's not a university-wide thing. It's just a program-based thing. Whereas Maastricht and some other universities, McMaster, I believe those have integrated it throughout the entire institution. Oh, good. Yeah, some more comments. I loved it and already put my mark there. Yeah, with the Google Maps, it's really great to see where people are from and where they're participating from. And thank you for clarifying. I mean, have you already noticed any kind of profile of PBL users around the globe? A profile of PBL users? I think the only, I guess, common denominator or factor, and again, let me know if this answers your question or not. I think in terms of the common denominator of all of the PBL users, at least participating within this MOOC, is that they're all looking to innovate learning. They're looking to create more connection and more meaning-driven education. So that's probably the main driver. I mean, I think there's a difference in terms of the profile. The age ranges pretty, I mean, I think it's like 25 to 45 were the primary users in the PBL. I'd also be happy to pull up the dashboard and kind of give you an overview. But in terms of a profile of kind of the common denominator of folks in this MOOC, I'd say the majority of people are basically just looking to innovate learning, regardless of location. And that's why they're exploring this. I don't know, does that help answer your question or not? If not, I can pull up some dashboard statistics if that would help as well. All right, I'll give just another minute or two just for any additional comments, questions that you guys have or would like to pose. It's a rough life of a dog back there. All right, well, I think we're at time. So I thank you guys for those of you who wanted to join or watch. And most importantly, thank you, Linda, just for joining again, sharing your perspective, your thoughts, ideas, and your experiences as a first-time PBL instructor. And again, Linda has a wealth of experience with her e-learning architects consulting firm as well. So she's also going to be a great resource for you guys to tap into in the future. But I would definitely, once you guys plan to implement PBL, you know, look for those mentors, look for those people you can connect with even within this MOOC afterwards, so that you have that community of support as you're going through the process. And otherwise, I think you guys have a fantastic week. I know there will be another PBL Hangout next week, and look forward to all that you guys are doing and kind of being able to see what you put together in your teams this week. So have a great night, day, afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are. And again, thank you, Linda, so much for joining us, and you guys all take care.
Thanks, Amber.